Today, we enter the darkest part of the entire divine history, because there is one element that runs through the entire Bible, from Genesis to Revelation. Blood, shed, offered, burned. A red trail that binds heaven and earth, but also stains human faith. The question is inevitable. Why would an all-powerful God need blood to please his name? More than 70 times in the Bible the phrase appears, a pleasing aroma to Yahweh, Leviticus 1:9. An aroma of burned flesh, an aroma of death. What kind of divinity takes pleasure in the smell of burning blood? Who truly enjoys the smoke rising from the altar? Because if God is spirit, why does he behave as if he needs to feed? Coders, today we dare to open the door that religion locked shut. If blood is sacred, who is it nourishing?
Before continuing our push, remember where we are. This is the Divine Conflict Saga, a journey where we analyze why the Bible describes two opposing faces of the divine, one that conquers through war, and another that heals through love. In the previous chapter, we exposed Yahweh as Lord of Hosts, a God who rules with fire and sword, but every war has a price, and that price was blood. Today we will reveal why that God needed sacrifices to please his name, and how blood became the currency of the spiritual covenant. This is not about attacking faith, but about seeking the true God beyond fear, violence, and control. If this knowledge resonates with you, subscribe and share. Let truth stop being a secret. Let's continue. The birth of sacrifice. From the beginning, there was something that marked the difference between approaching God or being rejected by him. Two brothers, two offerings, one chosen. Cain offers fruits of the land, life without pain, a gift without bloodshed. But Abel offers the first of his flock. A heart stops, blood hits the ground, and Yahweh is pleased. Yahweh looked with favor on Abel and his offering. Genesis 4:4. The message was clear. Blood is worth more than life without sacrifice. Why? Who decided that death is the only language God listens to? When the world is reset by the flood, Yahweh makes a covenant with Noah, but that covenant carries a warning. You shall not eat flesh with its life, that is, its blood. Genesis 9:4. Life is in the blood, and blood belongs to heaven. From that moment on, the altar becomes the border between humanity and the sacred. Slit, pour, burn. A burnt offering, a pleasing aroma to Yahweh. Leviticus 1:9, 70 times that phrase appears. 70 times. God approves the smell of death. And here the crack in the mystery appears. If God is spirit, why does he ask for food? If he is all-powerful, why does he need payment? If he is eternal, why does blood please him? A God who has everything, what does he gain from sacrifice? Coders, what religion called a holy ritual can also be read as a dark contract, a contract where the divine demands life in exchange for mercy, and humanity pays with blood. Sacrifice did not originate with humans, it was a demand from Yahweh. So then, if blood is sacred, who is really feeding on it? On Yahweh and the smell of blood. The Bible does not hide its language. Sacrifice is a spiritual meal. But who eats? When the altar is lit and blood is poured out, Scripture describes something unexpected. Yahweh descends upon the fire. He positions himself over the offering. He receives the aroma. Fire came out from before Yahweh and consumed the burnt offering. Leviticus 9:24. It does not say fire fell from heaven. It says it came from him, as if whatever was there was while it was hungry. The divine presence intensifies when there is sacrifice. The altar shall be sanctified by blood. Exodus 29:37. Without blood, God does not descend without blood. There is no connection. The forbidden question is this: are we facing a God who consumes vital energy from what dies? Because if life is in the blood, then consuming it is consuming life. And since antiquity, many cultures believed in celestial beings fed by offerings: the Sumerian gods, the Canaanite Baals, the Mexican gods, the Greek Olympians. Coincidence? Or the same pattern, under different names? If Yahweh is pure spirit, why does he need a flesh mediator to make contact? Why does his presence manifest only when the altar is burning? And even more disturbing, why does he describe himself as a devouring fire? For Yahweh, your God, is a consuming fire. Deuteronomy 4:24. A God who eats coders. Religion taught us that sacrifice was an act of love. But Scripture shows an act of divine survival. A God who demands blood to remain close to his people. Who needs whom? And if God needs sacrifices, what kind of God is he?
From voluntary offering to spiritual control. What began as an act of devotion quickly became a divine mandate. Approaching God with sacrifice was no longer optional. It was the only way. If anyone sins, he shall offer to Yahweh an unblemished animal. Leviticus 4:3. Every mistake, every failure, every impure thought was paid with blood. Laws multiplied. Rituals became institutionalized. Forgiveness stopped being a gift from God and became a system managed by priests. So who benefited more from sacrifice? God, or those who claimed to represent him? Because the greater the people's sin, the greater the altar's power. The more blood flowed, the stronger the mediation became. Priests controlled access to God. The people depended on them to be forgiven. Guilt became a spiritual economy. Yahweh becomes king. The altar becomes a throne. Blood becomes tax. Religion takes form. God above, priests in the middle, humanity below. A sacred pyramid that only stands if blood keeps flowing. If this sounds harsh, look at history. When Israel stopped sacrificing, Yahweh rejected them. Because you have despised my sacrifices, I will reject you. Hosea 8:13. A jealous God, demanding constant payment for the salvation he himself offers. Coders. Offering became obligation. Obligation became fear. Fear became obedience. Sacrifice no longer redeemed. Sacrifice bound. Why does a God who calls humans children treat them like perpetual debtors? What kind of father only shows love when blood is involved? Faith became a contract of control. And humanity, a nation in debt to a demanding God.
Jesus breaks the blood covenant. When Jesus enters history, he brings no new altar, no animals to sacrifice, no fire to burn. He brings words. And those words threaten the system, because Jesus declares something no priest would ever allow. I desire mercy, not sacrifice. Matthew 9:13. With a single sentence, he dismantles centuries of ritual. He breaks the temple's economy. He questions the necessity of blood. Jesus says relationship with God is not paid with death, but with love. He forgives sinners without demanding sacrifice. He heals the sick without charging blood. He opens access to God without intermediaries. So what happens to Yahweh? Because the Old Testament God said, without the shedding of blood there is no forgiveness. Hebrews 9:22. But Jesus looks at his executioners and says, Father, forgive them. Luke 23:34. No altar, no sacrifice, no price. That is betrayal to a blood-based system. Jesus removes the debt that kept humanity controlled. Jesus destroys the spiritual business. That is why the temple condemns him. That is why priests demand his death. That is why his blood becomes the last blood. Not because God demanded it, but because Jesus chose to end forever a covenant that should never have existed. Once his blood was shed, no more would be needed. It is finished. John 19:30, the final sentence on the old system. The God of blood loses power. The God of love replaces him. the temple veil is torn, the door to heaven opens for all. No altar, no priests, no sacrifices. That is divine revolution. Jesus did not come to fulfill the old covenant. He came to destroy it, and in destroying it, he freed us. But something darker remains. Who lost power when Jesus ended the age of sacrifice? What spiritual entity was left starving? And why does the world keep rebuilding altars if Jesus tore them down? The God who no longer receives blood. When Jesus dies, the spiritual history of the world changes forever. If sacrifices were the bridge between God and humanity, is by destroying that bridge, someone was left on the other side, isolated, without food, without power. The temple no longer works. The altar is no longer needed. The system collapses. And then comes one of the most symbolic acts in the Bible. The veil of the temple was torn in two. Matthew 27:51. That veil separated the divine presence from the people. By tearing it, Jesus declares, no one will control access to God. No one will own forgiveness. No one will charge blood for salvation. The old covenant dies with him. And when sacrifices stop, the presence that demanded them disappears. After Jesus, Yahweh never again asks for blood. No fire descends to consume flesh. No miracle requires burnt offerings. That leaves us with a disturbing revelation. If Yahweh needed sacrifices and no longer receives them, who truly ruled the temple and the altar? Who benefited from the constant flow of blood? Why did Jesus call it a den of thieves? Mark 11:17. Why did he confront the priesthood before the Roman Empire? The answer is dangerous. Jesus did not come to overthrow a government. He came to dethrone a spiritual entity that had established itself as God, but was not the true God. That is why he was crucified. That is why they tried to silence him. Jesus freed humanity from a covenant that kept it indebted and kneeling before a God that demanded blood. Coders, if Jesus cut that covenant and closed that altar, why do religions still rely on sacrifice, fear, and guilt? Why do so many still need blood to feel close to God? What force keeps trying to revive a system that was already defeated? The real question is this: who was the God of the Old Covenant if Jesus came to destroy his system? And even more disturbing, is that God still active, disguised as light?
Now we are here, the real point, the God behind the blood. Today we saw something that is never preached, never admitted in religious institutions. The God who demanded sacrifices is not the same God who came to free humanity. One demanded animal deaths to be pleased. The other gave his own life so no one else would die. One ruled through fear, the other through love. One consumed blood, the other shedded so no more would be needed. Coders, if Jesus came to correct the previous covenant, then we must ask the most dangerous question of all. Who were we worshipping before, when we worshipped Yahweh? Because if the true God does not need blood, who was really on the other side of the altar? Who crowned himself divine through sacrifice? Who turned forgiveness into a bloody debt? And why do powers still exist trying to keep that control system alive? Faith was meant to free us, but someone used it to chain us. Jesus removed blood from the throne. The system collapsed. And since then, that entity has been trying to regain power. The spiritual war did not end at the cross. It had just begun. So coders, prepare yourselves, because in the next chapter we will reveal the identity of the God who needed sacrifices, and why Jesus called him the ruler of this world. John 12:31. If this knowledge resonates with your spirit, subscribe and share this video with those who still feel that something doesn't fit in the sacred story. We have just broken the silence. The truth is bleeding now. See you in the next chapter.